Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. In this episode we're going to dig a little bit further into the vintage Mopar Flathead engine that I've been tearing apart. We're going to get in, we're going to learn how to use Pastigauge, and we're going to measure the bearing clearances on the bottom end of the crank. And we're also going to get in there, we're going to look at those expansion plugs. In an earlier video I tried to drain my block and nothing would come out when I opened the drain petcock because it was full of sediment. I ended up having to pull the petcock out and poke around with a screwdriver. I was surprised to find that was plugged. So in this episode we're going to get in there, we're going to take some of those expansion plugs out and really see how much crap, scale, sediment, whatever is in the bottom of my block, and I think you'll be surprised. So here we go, let's get at it, enjoy. I was experiencing a leak here. It's rust coming down just like this. This is from when I pulled my water plug out. And when I picked away all the dirt and the scale, I found a hole actually in the frost plug on the edge there. You can see it. Rusted right through. I guess that's what happens after, what, 1953 engine. It's getting up there in age. Normal rust. I'm interested to see how much scale and rust is in here. We know it was above the water hole. In my earlier video, we took the plug out and it wouldn't drain. Nice. So there you have another example of the crud in this engine. Now this engine did not really overheat. I mean, it did till I replaced the radiator. Rad was plugged up pretty bad. I need a spoon to get that out of there. It's interesting to me how much crud is in these engines. It's unbelievable. There is a ton of crap in there. Unbelievable. It's like someone threw mud in there. Unbelievable. We'll rinse all that out. Let's try the next hole over here. It's the one that was leaking. Rusted up pretty good, as you can see, a whole chunk missing there. That's where it was leaking out the bottom there. Again, look at the crap in there. Wow. Good running engine. And if anybody ever second guessed why I might want to pull this engine out because it was running, when I saw a broken frost or a leaking frost plug, and when I tried to drain the block, and I saw how much crud was in there, I knew this engine was coming out. I had to get this out of here. It literally looks like mud. It's like somebody actually filled the engine with mud. Unbelievable. If you've been watching any of my other videos, you see me driving this car around and ran good. Imagine how cool it's going to be when I get this block cleaned out. This is definitely going to a hot tank. I'm going to take this in to the machine shop and get them to do it. It's a mess. So that kind of changes my my thought process in terms of how far I might go in this engine. So the crank's coming out, timing chain, camshaft, everything's coming out. This thing's going into a hot tank, And then I'll still measure the crank bearings here shortly just to get an idea if I need to do anything to the crank, but definitely it's coming apart for a hot tank. So I've set up my my dial indicator gauge here to measure crankshaft thrust clearance. That's the direction that the crankshaft will move forward to back. I had to zoom in really closer so you could try and get you to be able to read the gauge. It's currently sitting on 0. I see 6 thou. There's 6 thou of clearance there. Crankshaft thrust. If I go back to frontwards, set that at 0 again. 6.5. I just used pry bar here on a crankshaft to pry it forward and back. We're moving on now to checking bearing clearances. I'm using Pastigauge. It's a small little piece of, I'll show you what it looks like here for the newbies. A tiny little strip of a special type of plastic. It comes wrapped in this piece of paper. And you lay that piece of plastic in the bearing and you tighten up your bearing, and then you measure how wide it is after you squish the piece of plastic inside the bearing. There's a different thicknesses of the plastic. So it's called Pastigauge. It's been around for a long time and it works pretty well. So you take the cap off, clean all the oil out of both surfaces, and then you put a little strip of plastic on there, and you tighten it back down, torque it to spec, take the cap off and measure it. I'm not real proud of that bearing. It's had a fair bit of dirt go through it. I had it off earlier this year and looked at number 1 before. I knew what it was going to look like. Something's gone through there. Small piece of dirt of some type. Fair bit of dirty oil. It's coming out of the oil hole there and smearing on there in the bearing surface. When I measured the Pastigauge here, you just take the little strip like this and you hold it up against it and you measure it. And I'm getting, if you can see there, the width. That, if it was that wide, it would be, what is that, 1.5 thou? It's hard to focus here, I'm trying to. There's 2 thou and 3 thou. So mine strip's a little wider. I'm in that 2 thou range. So I'm gonna go through and do them all. I'll do all the rods first, then I'll go back and do the mains. So 2 thou clearance. And spec is, well, I'll have to look it up, but I think it's 0.5 thou to 2.5 thou. So I'm right in spec. I'll show you this one here. So we're wiping all the oil off, both surfaces. I'll bring this over to the camera here. See what I'm seeing there? It's not a serious score line. It's right near where the oil comes out. The bearing is doing its job. It's got a few pieces there in the bearing material there. It's doing its job. But see the lines? It's, the oil's coming out and it's dirty. Sludge maybe, I don't know. Soot. If you run your oil too long and you don't change it, you get high soot buildup in your oil. Soot is extremely corrosive, and it just, like sandpaper, chews up the inside of your engine. So don't be leaving your engine oil too long. Especially as an engine gets older, it makes maybe a little more blow by. When I just dropped my piece of I just dropped my final piece of Pastigauge. Darn it. Interruptions and distractions. I tell you, I was just on the floor looking for my green piece of Pastigauge, and then my phone rang. And it was some car guy who wants to give me a bunch of transmission parts. So yeah, the guy phones me and he's got a box of 1930s Mopar transmission pieces. He wants to give me the whole box. He said the box is so heavy he can't even lift it. So I am becoming a junk collector. It's funny, all the locals here, the guys in the car club, I'm a member. Anyways, vintage car club. So they all know I'm into this old Chrysler junk, and I seem to be the catch basin for spare parts, and I think that's pretty cool. I'm not complaining. I think it's awesome. They're entrusting me with their stuff. Let's go 75, 80 pounds. Yeah, they wanted to go to a good home. And they see me doing this kind of stuff, so they're happy to pass along. You know what, I'm happy to take it. If I can't find a home for it myself, here in my cars, I can always look up the part numbers and pass it along to other people, right? So if you're listening to this video, you have an 30s Chrysler, you need a transmission part, leave a message, maybe I'll call. I might have your part. Alright, I think we'll wrap up today, do a brief summary about my new developments and what I've learned today. My goal today was to Pastigauge and find out all the clearances on the bearings, just was interested. I also wanted to see what the crank journals look like, machine surface of the crank, and they look really good. I don't see any damage. If anything, maybe might need a little polish, maybe. There's some varnish on there just from the oil over the years. The bearings, I mean, they're not wore out. They're just, someone's been running dirty oil in there. So I'm thinking all new bearings. I haven't been able to pull out my pistons yet because I don't have a ridge reamer. I gotta line one up. I'm either gonna borrow one or buy one. I don't know if I'll ever use it again. You never know. But I want to use a ridge reamer to take that ridge off the top of the cylinder, then I can push the pistons out. I want to see what my pistons look like. I suspect I might have some broken rings. We shall see. So I cannot progress. I'm not lifting the crank out with the pistons connected. That's not happening, the connecting rods. So I've retorqued my mains just to support my crank. I got into the rear seal. I had quite a leaking rear seal. Was a pain in the butt. And I found that it was very rigid and stiff. The rubber was no longer soft. One of the end pieces that sits up inside of it looks like this rubber piece here. It wasn't really sitting nicely. It was cockeyed. It's chewed up a bit, so I'm thinking that's probably why my rear main seal was leaking. Glad to address that. We looked at the crud today in the block. Holy cow. What a load of scale and rust and mud. It looked like mud coming out of the block. Unbelievable. That addresses that and my expansion plugs. This is the reason why I pulled my block, was the expansion plugs were leaking, rear main seals, a pain in the butt. Wanted to check my valves, wanted to check my bearing clearances. So we're solving all these problems. The other thing we learned today is don't drop your Pastigauge because you'll never see it again. I had about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inch piece left I was going to use in the green. Green is 1 to 3 thou, and it disappeared. I never saw it again. So I started using some red, which is 2 to 6 thou. I was getting inconsistent measurements compared to the green, but I'm happy anyways. All the bearings are being replaced. The crank looks good. Next steps for me are probably going to be, I'm going to take all the valves apart. It's just been a fairly long day out here, so I'm going to probably stop for the night. take out all the valves and check the valve guides for wear. That'll be my next video probably. Get all the valves out, get the poppets up, then I can slide the camshaft out, get that ridge off, get the crank out, get it to the machine shop, I guess. So there's not a whole lot of new things to teach you today. It's really just about disassembly at this point and inspecting things and looking for wear. If you learn how to use fine measuring equipment like micrometers, gauges, dial gauges, that's the fun part of looking at your engine condition and learning how worn things were. The next expert to look at this engine is going to be a machinist. I'll progress with taking the bottom end out, taking the valves out, and then it's going to go to the machine shop. So I think I'm going to probably go over bore to, I'll go 1/16 over. That's going to give me a 3 7/16 of an inch bore, 4 1/4 inch stroke, and that engine was fairly common back in the DeSoto and Chrysler, I think in the early 40s. And I'm not 100% sure today what that nets me. I think it's probably around, is it 241 cubic inch or maybe it's 238, something like that. So that'll be nice, a little extra power. So thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe, I appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next video. It'll be about valve train disassembly, and we'll do valve guide inspections and clean up some valves and stuff like that, see what they look like. Talk about doing a valve grind. All right, have a good one.